All right, Bryan. We get through the draft and a lot of really good value that the Cowboys got across the board. Maybe didn't address your biggest needs in a timely manner that people wanted. You didn't get a wide receiver two at all. You waited till the fifth to get a running back. But overall, when you look at the draft class that they got, the players that they got, how do you evaluate the haul that the Cowboys got over the weekend?
Yeah, I really do appreciate you retweeting the clip I had, the question I asked Ross Winchie, the national scout for the Cowboys. And it appeared to me they really set their board up not thinking about needs. They set their board up, to reflect the players that they liked. And they picked their board is what they did. And it's funny, I know on my particular stack of the 235 players that I studied, I had it in reverse order. Their third-round player was my best player. Their second-round player was my next best player. And the player that they took first was the third best player. So it was the way, if you could get, just on my evaluation, if you could get three players in the first 37 picks, that tells me a lot right there. And I really do believe that they I think we're all a little guilty, guys, leading up to the draft. And I'm talking about the media and maybe even the national media as well. We were talking about receiver, Golden, McMillan, Abuka, Golden, Millen, and we were just kept talking about receiver. And they were just sitting there looking at their board going, okay, when we set this thing up, there was obviously a gap between McMillan and Golden and their stack. There obviously was. We all believe, well, they're just going to pivot. Once they lose McMillan, they're going to pivot to Golden. And we'll see. History will see if they were right or wrong. But they clearly had players. And I know a couple of days up leading to the draft, I was trying to kind of talk through. And, when Jerry Jones came out in that press conference and said, we haven't set our board, that was kind of a clue to me that they were having discussions about where some of these guys were going to fit. And they obviously did an exercise where McMillan was off the board, and they said, no, we're comfortable with Booker right here. We're comfortable. They had a gap between their receivers, and the gap happened to be one of the players that they drafted. So I give them credit. I always, you always want them to draft the board. Take the stack, don't jump tags, take the players you want, and then fill in the pieces later as you go along.
Do teams manipulate their board at times? Is that philosophy that happens?
Yeah, that happens. I mean, there's a couple of times where, if you remember, even the Jerry Jones when Johnny Manziel was on the board, and Jerry was trying to manipulate the board. And Steven and Jason Garrett and Will McClay wouldn't let him do it. No, Jerry, we lose Ryan Shazier. Jerry reminds the room that, hey, Johnny Manziel's still on the board, guys. And everybody's like, no, we got Zach Martin. Zach Martin's the next tag. And so it's, but yeah, you get some teams. Unfortunately, Tom Siskowski lost his job because of, if you go back to the Sharif Floyd draft, where they had him in the top 5 on their board, and all of a sudden Rod Marinelli comes in and goes, well, I don't like him in the top 5, and now there's a little bit of that chaos there, and so you're kind of having to move around. So, but yeah, it's teams do kind of say, well, maybe we need to go do this now, maybe we need to do that, and unfortunately, that's just like window dressing your board, and to me, that's just not the best way to operate.
Bryan, do you think it's also just a function of the fact that they didn't get the wide receiver two as a function of just the way things fell ahead of them? So, if McMillan is there at 12, they take McMillan. If Burden is there at 44, they probably take Burden. And I don't know. Who knows? Maybe if they get to 76, I don't know how much they liked Trey Harris or Jack Besh, but maybe Besh or Harris make them, it's close enough to Revel that they go, okay, well, that's a need enough, and we have them graded closely enough that we can go that direction. Do you think it's just they were in a kind of no man's land where receivers that they liked in that range were getting picked off, and so the next one, if they would have taken them there, they would have really been jumping their board?
Yeah, no, I think they might have had the receivers that you're talking about in position to take. And you're a little bit at the mercy of the draft at that point in time. Now, they really didn't have the capital to be able to say, listen, we're about to lose one of these receivers and we need to go get one. They were, without that 4th-round pick and their unwillingness to give up their third-round pick, like I said, that was the 11th best player on my board. So I applaud them for not moving and giving up that, they could have very easily given up that 3rd and gotten back and moved up and grabbed one of those wide receivers. But I kind of had an idea, Bobby, and we talked about it on the G-Bag Nation, that they were going to come and tell us that, hey, one of these receivers, where it's Mingo, with Tolbert, one of these guys that got to step up. I think they still have a plan for trying to go and grabbing a receiver. I really do, whether it's in free agency. There's maybe some avenues they can go there, and maybe even to trade for some of next year's capital can go get them a receiver. So I don't think they're done with trying to grab a guy right now.
Trade another 4th.
Yeah,
that every year now anyway.
That's what we
just
do.
Trade another 4th-round pick.
We trade the 4th. That's what we do. Brian, when I look at this though, we talk about, there were a lot of people who said it wasn't a needs draft. It wasn't a needs draft, but it is interesting when you look at, you get Booker at right guard, you get Ezeraku at edge, Revel at corner, Blue at running back, and you look down the list. I think there's a case to be made that your top 4 picks, and then maybe Toya, and maybe even James, I don't know, if things go a certain way, you could have 5 or 6 of these guys start games for you next year potentially.
Absolutely. Yeah. To me, that the fact that, like I said, I in my heart of hearts, I knew if they liked Booker, then, or they were thinking about maybe moving Banks, that kind of thing. If they drafted Banks and they were going to move, that would have been a good pick. Does it fill something they could have used? Yeah. I mean, Booker's going to come in and start, that's just the way that's going to be over there. I mean, no offense to Brock Hoffman, but Brock Hoffman for 5 to 6 games is fine. Brock Hoffman for 17 games is not fine. So Booker comes in and will fill that role and probably fill it at a very high level. But yeah, every one of the picks, the Ravel pick at corner, him working with Britt Brown, getting back on the field very soon will help everything.
Broaddus, what is your take on, because I saw a lot of people say that, taking a guard at 12 is not great value. I think it's, I have no problem with it. I think, you shore up the interior, you shore up any offensive line position. I'm all about it. Where do you stand on that? Is that bad value?
I'm just about taking good players. I'm from the school of, I would have taken, everybody was talking about you can't take Ashton Genty at 12. You can't take a running back at 12. Yeah, you can if he's the second best player in your stack. I had Hunter number 1 and Ashton Genty number 2. My job is to take players, to take the best players. People talk about positional value and all that stuff like that. You will find, if you're good enough at this, you will find other players to supplement your team. That's your job. But your job, number 1, line 1, is to be able to take the best players. Taking a guard at that spot, I have no problem with that. I'm just trying to stack my players and the best players to the least. And however number I have on that board, those are the guys I want to take, and I should be comfortable with that. And I don't think, people talk about that all the time, positional value stuff, and it's the metrics thing and all that. Play one of these games without a runner and see how that goes. Try not to in your division, don't block Philadelphia's 1 techniques or the Giants' 1 technique or the Commanders' 1 technique. Don't block those guys and see how well you play. Is it positional value if you can't block those guys? Because you're saying, oh, wait, we can't take one of those guys. We can't have one of the best guys at that position blocking that guy. No, that's ridiculous to me.
Bryan Broaddus joins us here on 105 Through the Fan. We talked a lot Friday morning about Tyler Booker, so the listeners have heard a lot about him. For those who don't follow along with the draft show, don't listen to the coverage, and this is the first time, all right, I'm getting a chance to hear about the new guys they got. Let's run down the list a little bit and get your thoughts on some of the primary guys. Let's start with Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher from Boston College, a guy who, this is a legitimate, I think a lot of people felt like borderline first-round player that is going to get after the quarterback. This guy wins a lot.
He wins a lot, and he knows how to bend. There was in this draft, there were some bendy guys, and there were some guys that kind of were better run defenders. This guy can legitimately rush the passer. This guy is one of those, the first step, that able to attack. He puts a lot of pressure on offensive tackles because his ability to play really, really low and dip, and then he knows how to finish at the quarterback. And they move this guy around a ton. This is very similar to how the Cowboys will play with Micah Parsons. They'll stand him up over here. They'll put him down over here. They'll make a matchup over here. Boston College did a great job. Tim Lewis did a great job of moving him around in order to make him have opportunities to rush.
Yeah, and you're seeing some of the video up on the fan cam right now of Ezraku winning against North Carolina. And man, they used him, like you said, a lot of different ways. They'd line him up on both edges. They'd put him in the A gap. He's a really fun player, if a little bit undersized, but he's a really fun player. The guy you loved a ton, you've already mentioned. Tell us about East Carolina corner Savone, as we found out, Savone Ravel.
Savone Ravel is he was one of my, if he does not have the knee problem or the knee issue, then he's going to be one of the best corners in this draft. And, you know, at 6'2", the length, the first thing you're going to notice when you see him in person is how long he is as a player. And it serves him very well. He's got really quick feet. He can play with the burst. He's extremely tough. I was watching the Michigan game. They try and run a play down on the goal line to the outside. It bounces to the outside. Edwards is trying to take the ball in, and Ravel meets him at the goal line. And you think, man, a corner with a back at the goal line is a disaster. Yeah, it was a disaster for Michigan because he didn't get in the end zone. This kid is extremely tough. He can rally on routes across the field, down the field. He's a hard guy to run away from. Dr. Cooper did the surgery from the Cowboys. You know he's in good hands there. And Britt Brown's about to grab this kid and really, really kind of take him to another level and get him back on the field very, very soon. So really super excited about the ability and what this kid brings to it.
We talked about a lot of running backs during the draft lead up, Bryan, as Bryan Broaddus joins us here on 105 through the Fan. With the 5th round pick, the running back that the Cowboys end up getting is Jaden Blue from Texas, a guy I don't know that we talked about as much. And Aiden's going to throw up some video of Jaden Blue on the fan cam here. But tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Jaden Blue.
Yeah, extremely explosive as a back. He's, you know, you think at 5'9", 196 pounds, he's a small guy. You know, he is more likely to break tackles the way of avoiding tackles is what he's going to do. You get in him in a one-on-one situation, it is a real problem for the defender. His ability to plant, cut, avoid, the quickness. He's an outstanding pass catcher. There's a couple of backs in this draft, him and Allen from Syracuse, who are outstanding. Smith from SMU, outstanding pass catchers. This kid was one of them. You throw the ball to him in space, it is a nightmare for the defense to have to deal with.
Really quick, Bryan, just on the Blue front, because I know Chop is going to have a question for you. You mentioned him as a pass catcher. Absolutely, like a legit mismatch that you can line up at receiver at times.
Absolutely, yep.
There were some issues, and I'm curious if you had any problems with this. Some swing passes he drops. Some swing passes that he'll drop, or he had a ball bounce off his hands against ULM. I think they got picked off, or he doesn't. So when you saw any of that on tape, did you look at that was focus or just some off target stuff that he maybe wasn't totally? What is that? Because you do see definitely some real pop as a pass catcher.
Yeah, but and then you watch the Ohio State game where they swing him a couple of times and he gets 2 touchdowns as well. So sometimes receivers do have concentration lacks. Maybe the ball got on him too quick. Maybe he didn't identify where it was. I just see so many times with him, though, not just screen passes, but upfield routes, inside Texas routes. Those little out, then inside, quick break, boom, ball on him, and then he's north and south into the end zone. Yeah, you're going to have some of those where you're going to have a couple of them where it could, get on you or you didn't track it the right way. But most of the time, everything that was thrown his direction was reception and resulted into a big play.
Broaddus, is there a team in the NFC East that you thought absolutely nailed it this weekend?
Well, I'll tell you what, there was a couple of teams that I really, really liked. I liked what Jacksonville did, and I liked what you're talking about the East. In Philadelphia, they had so many picks, and I think where Philadelphia did some damage was in the second half of the draft. Their first round picks, but that's a team that's very, very talent rich. They got some guys that they made decisions on that they're going to move on from, but Philadelphia, to me, the players where they fell for them. I'm just talking about the draft in general too. Kansas City, Baltimore were another couple of teams where it seemed that the best players, I know on my stack, those were the ones, but I think Philadelphia helped themselves. I think the Giants absolutely helped themselves. I'm a fan of Jackson Dart myself. I didn't have him over Shador Sanders, but both those guys right there in the second round where he was picked. I think he was the 27th best player on my board. So right where he was taken, that's kind of where I felt. But Philadelphia, to me, the Commanders, the division, they picked off 2 or 3 players that are going to be factors in this year's season.
Last one before we let you go, Broaddus. We've got a lot of people obviously who are curious about Shador Sanders. What did you think about him as a player and in general, your perception of his fall to the 5th round?
Yeah, I think it was unfortunate. I don't quite understand it from my perspective. I know on my board I had him as the 20th best player. I had 15 first-round grades, so that means that put him in the second round where I would have had him or been comfortable selecting him. So, maybe on some other drafts, he's a little bit further down or maybe he's a little bit higher. But yeah, the thing that, teams might not have liked talking to him in a way of they put him on the board. Maybe they didn't feel like that. They didn't feel very comfortable that he was able to process the information that they were asking him to do. He had a pro coach that was working with him, at Colorado, Pat Shermer. So there's some elements of the pro game that you watch Shador Sanders, attempt to do and been able to be successful doing it. So I think, sometimes teams just don't like players. Maybe he came off bad in the interviews. There's a lot of talk about that. Maybe they put him on the board. They didn't think he was smart enough. Some teams, maybe teams will do different things to kind of get an idea about these quarterbacks. But it's very surprising to me, especially where I had him on my stack, how far he did fall. I think Cleveland got a hell of a quarterback. I personally had him over Dylan Gabriel. I think Dylan Gabriel's a fine quarterback. But if you watch the tape, to me, the plays that Sanders makes off platform, throwing to his left, there's some things you're going to have to clean up with the feet and stuff, but they'll find a way to get that done.